Support for Butter City is provided by
Today we're talking about film festival.
That adds color to the story.
Roll sound. Cameras rolling.
And welcome to this episode of Butter City, a show all about filmmaking with a little bit of a Minnesota twist. And today we have Mark Tang in the studio with us. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, you're a filmmaker, producer, you shoot, you edit, you kind of do the whole, like you had your hand in quite a bit over a very long history. I mean, you've been making films, you started back in Hong Kong.
Well, yeah, but I did get my education in the U.S., but, the kind of schooling we came from is we are hands-on filmmakers. We go from planning how to shoot to finally cutting the negative, putting it together for the lab to print it. So that's where we came from.
Yeah, and even as you're saying, like, the cutting the negative and stuff, you're reminding me of all the steps, the transitions we've gone through, from analog to digital. And what, when you think about like the number of different, you've made music videos, you've made, promotional pieces, you've made documentaries, you've made narrative style stuff. What was it originally that got you even attracted to this craft?
Well, it's really amazing. I fell in love with it. Not when I was a kid, I didn't even have television until I was in high school. But I fell in love with it in my junior year in college after seeing little shorts made by Charlie Chaplin, being just tremendously inspired and amazed at someone who can shoot, write the story, shoot, act, compose his own music, and everything, the whole shebang. And yet coming up with pieces that really can touch people, can move people. And that's what really got me into filmmaking is like, okay, I love a lot of things. I love music, I love writing. Reading, not writing. I'm terrible at writing. And so I was thinking, well, what can I do to really express myself? And then after I made my few Super 8 films in school, in college, I see how they can touch people. That's when I knew, okay, that's it. That's it for me, But and then went on this journey, it's amazing.
When you think about that idea about how to touch somebody, that has to have changed and evolved for you about how you do that for you. Like how you choose to do that has changed over your career. Has it not?
Well, the technology part of it has changed, but the storytelling part has never changed. If you, I always tell my students, if you don't have something, forget about all the techniques of how to do shots and whatnot. If you don't have a good story, you're not going to be able to reach out. When you don't have anything to communicate to people, then there's no point, in making that piece. There's someone's nephew, someone's niece can pick up a little camera and start shooting. We got all this footage out there, but if you don't have an idea, you don't really have something that you're passionately involved in and really genuine, then...
Is there a test that you do with yourself? Like when you're looking at a new project, do you give yourself a time frame to sort of sit with a project? How do you test out that feel for the story, that feel for your commitment to make that story?
Well, I don't know how to say it, but I don't look for the story. I don't look for the project. Usually it's the project found me in terms of someone passed along an idea or something that happened. And And having been involved with filmmaking for so many years now, that I don't get into project, easily, because I know, and I'm the kind of person that most of the time I do really long pieces, so it's not something that can get done in 2 weeks or a month. So if I'm going to get involved in a project, I want to be sure that I can live with it every day for the next 3 years. It's kind of almost like a marriage. If you're not sure about it, don't do it. It's all intuition. And if I don't feel deep inside that something that really compels me, that I can't sleep, I got to do something about it, then forget it. There are lots of filmmakers out there. Anyone can pick up a camera and do something. So why should I add to that unless I feel that I have something that's uniquely, mine, that I feel that it would be beneficial to other people if I share with them. So that's.
I was going to ask you, so when you think about that, when sitting with a project, if you can be married to it for 3 years, if one of the things you ask yourself is, can any filmmaker make this, or am I the one that needs to make this because of the way
That's exactly
you see it?
It's like, given the same topic, same story, you can ask 10 people, 10 filmmakers, and each, they can, if they are capable filmmaker, any one of them can do a very capable job. And again, if they are filmmakers that have a vision, then each would come back with something that unique need themselves. So what I ask myself is, am I really, feel so badly that I really want to spend my life to doing this? And why could other people do it? I have to wrestle with that for a while. It's like this documentary film, Open Season, that Lou Lippo and I co-produced. It's something that we didn't go into it, just, oh, wow, there's this thing going on, we're going to do it. It took me a while, and hesitation. Why should I be doing it? It's a story initially about the conflict, between the rural white population and this Hmong guy from St. Paul. I'm not even Hmong. Why should I want to do it? In this day and age of self-determination, why couldn't, this is their story, even though I empathize and sympathize with the situation. But eventually, I did, talk to some of my friends in the Hmong community, Hmong filmmakers that I knew, and it was sort of like a hot potato. This is like 7 years ago, right? And with the support of other independent filmmakers, in around the area, I really reluctantly plunged into this thing, as it was an ongoing thing. It wasn't like something that's continue happening. So, but anyway, that's.
Well, that's actually it's a great setup. So I'd like to take a moment and take a look at the trailer for this film, Open Season.
That morning, if I wouldn't say, let's go that side of the forest, maybe this wouldn't happen.
Believing that he was going to shoot at me, I said, don't you shoot at me, son of a.
The trial begins for a Minnesota man accused in the Wisconsin hunting rampage killing.
There are 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide with use of a dangerous weapon.
How did this thing turn into a war? Did they fire a shot at him? Was that true? Did they fire a warning shot? Something had to have happened to make him snap into this war mode.
Do you know you are trespassing 400 acres of land, you damn you Asians keep coming to my land, I'm gonna kick your
Mark, this is obviously a powerful piece. It's a powerful piece because just as a person living here in Minneapolis, I know that this is a powerful story, and it had a lot of reverberations throughout a lot of different communities. And you chose to approach this project with a co-producer, with Lou. And I'm wondering, earlier we're talking about the importance of like knowing your own vision, your own reason for telling a story. What benefit, like what enhancement for the story or for your own process with this film happened by working with another producer?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because this is probably the only project or the first project that I collaborated with, another producer. And going back to when this incident happened, it was a really uproar, not only in Twin Cities, it was on CNN, New York Times sent reporters to Rice Lake, and it was another big thing, not only in the Twin Cities, in the hunting world, how could this person did a thing like that, and then it all takes place within the context, also at that time, with this kind of underpinning of anti-immigrant, anyone that's different kind of feeling, in the upper Midwest. And myself being an immigrant and having worked in the Twin Cities Asian communities over the years, I saw the pain, that's inflicted, not only, on the community where people were shot and killed, but also in the Hmong American and to a large extent Asian American community, in the area, that this is something that one person had done, but they feel, the community felt like that they're all at fault, and all the nightly news reports, singling out the Hmong community like, oh, these are people who don't read or write, they don't know property, so I was very genuinely, emotionally involved and felt that as a filmmaker, what can I do? I'm not someone that can do anything. I don't like to go to protests or whatever. So I can use my skill, as a filmmaker to do something about it, to provide more context, more humanity in the situation, But also knowing that because I'm an immigrant and I'm very emotionally involved with the community, I need someone who has a cooler head, who can look at this, at more of a distance, to balance out, the push and pull, in my heart. And Lou came on board, a year after we started filming, and it was thanks to her, really, I looked for the emotional essence of the story, and she was the one that provided the balance, the checks and balances, and the intellectual pinnings, underpinnings of the final film.
It's a powerful piece, and I'm wondering, as you were just talking about, like the emotions that were involved with it. Do you think you had a little bit more? Do you think you were sitting in a unique position because you aren't Hmong, but yet at the same time you have this familiarity with being an immigrant, with being Asian, with feeling the repercussions of the way people were talking about this, and obviously other context. Do you think that not being Hmong really helped you with the story, like freed you up in some ways, or was that ever? Did that ever even become a barrier for you?
See, that's really interesting. If you were a white filmmaker, none of these questions would ever come into your mind, and that's the burden of being a person of color in this country. That for some unknown reason, or the baggage, the history of this country, that whenever we do something, suddenly, we're not an individual anymore. We represent a whole community and whatnot. But anyway, so back to your question is, yes, I really didn't want to make this film because I thought, oh, this is really a Hmong story. We need someone from the Hmong community that knew the community that should be doing it. And I just started doing it because I thought, well, no one is in the community is doing it. Okay, let's go ahead and do it and see what. But yeah, but I think ultimately I realized, in the end, where an Asian American friend told me like years later, it's like, well, you're perfect. You're not Hmong, you're not white, you're nobody. You're really outside. I guess as artists, we're sort of always kind of looking in from the outside. So because I'm not Hmong American, I guess it frees me up, to ask some questions that maybe if I'm Hmong, I wouldn't want to do it. And because I'm not white, again, I have lived in this country for long enough time that I can see how, the larger community look at things, but I can also see it from the point of view of the minority community, how things, how they're being treated, how the atmosphere have set up, for this kind of conflict, not only in the woods, but, in everyday life. So I feel lucky in the sense that, hey, I'm nowhere, I'm nobody, but I have a unique, vantage point. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, listening to you talking about figuring out the stance, but at the same time, figuring out your stance as a filmmaker and why you would make something, but at the same time, a recognition that art is something that's really permeable. It's about kind of being open and curious, and so in that way, you do open yourself up to a wide range of perspectives and insight. So I think it's a powerful piece, and I know you went on and outside of that project, you went on and you worked with Ed Boak.
Yeah, Ed Buckley or Ed Lee.
Mm-hmm. We went and worked with Ed Buckley, who's a poet, local poet here, and you ended up working with him on this next video piece that we were going to look at. How did this piece differ from Open Season for you? I mean, it's a totally different setup. But when you went into it, how did this feel different to you?
Well, the thing about Open Season is we really started out wanting to do the piece as a way to promote dialogue, between communities, and also being mindful and respectful of families who have lost loved ones. You want to give voices, in a way to everyone that was impacted, most people that was impacted by this tragic event. And also being that it's going to be a piece on national public television, it requires, I wouldn't say it required, but we wanted to really to make it accessible for, all segments of the society. And in that sense, it's a piece that we wanted to be really fair and have, and balanced. Whereas with Ed have seen my work in progress of Open Season over the years, and it inspired him to write a poem, of his response, and in a way represent an Asian American response to this tragedy in the wood, and also to the film. So I think, again, it's another freedom that I took advantage of, that, hey, I think we're in sync here, Ed, and Ed is the one that asked me to help him to do this piece in the woods, to launch his book. And I think it worked out really well. I think it's a good companion piece to Open Season in terms of for people who are outside of the Asian community to get an understanding of how the community really responded to this horrible incident.
Let's watch it. Let's take a look at it.
If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? If a rifle fires a shot in the woods, whose body first hits the ground?
Gunned down, 5 dead, more injured in a hunting rampage. Police say an eruption of rage triggered the shootings. Tonight, a St. Paul family is shocked that one of their own is accused in this trail of
somebody
terror.
do such a horrific, inhumane act.
A report released today in Hayward raises questions of who fired first on Sunday.
We still don't really know who shot first. Fired. The first shot is in dispute.
Vane claims he acted in self-defense.
The family of one of the victims say they don't believe it.
If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? If a rifle fires a shot in the woods, whose body first hits the ground? If a group of angry hunters surrounds, curses at, and accosts you for wandering onto their land, if you apologize for being lost, inform you saw no posted signs, swallow their chinks this and gooks taking over that, are walking away over mud and fallen leaves when a loud crack far behind you kicks up black earth. If your father was conscripted to fight on the side of the United States or the CIA during the war in Vietnam, if he, your mother, you, the oldest son, and all your younger siblings were later abandoned in the hills of Laos as targets for genocide by the Viet Cong. If, after 5 years in a Thai refugee camp, you come to this land as a teen, a casualty of history and time, then receive 3 years of training to become a sharpshooter in the U.S. military. If you spent your adolescence watching blacks, Asians, Latinos, and whites watching one another, watch each other for weaknesses and flaws. If, after this first blast, you wheel around in a bright orange vest, glimpse an angry, possibly inebriated man lowering or reciting his rifle in hand.
You know, Mark, this is such a powerful piece, and I know that the open season in this piece is such a limited window into all the work that you've done. Is there something that you think is a line through, like not to limit you to like a arts board artist statement, but is there a line through that you could say all of my work has to do with, you know, these two sentences? What would you say is sort of the kind of the pull through?
I guess my work in the U.S. is really all about home. Where's home? You know, especially for immigrants, and other than unless you're American Indian, you know, we're all immigrants. So where's home? You know, whose home is this anyway? Whose land is this anyway? You know, so it's really, I guess, subtle underneath the surface. I want to show people, you know, what a larger context, you know, humanity, about, you know, this country has become so much black and white, you know, over the last 25 years I've been here. I really want to remind people that, you know, there are more to it than the surface. You know, whenever we watch news, we really need to look underneath the surface. That's how.
Do you think it's? I mean, this is going to sound kind of like an ignorant question, but I still want to ask it. Like, do you think that having the skills that you have, having, you know, worked with this medium for as many years as you have, does that free you up? Does filmmaking become sort of like a liberating, you know, like as we talk about the sense that, you know, you have this vision or this idea of the story, that you're the only one that can tell it that way. Is filmmaking tied to sort of a freedom as well for you?
Yes and no. You know, it's a double-edged sword, at least under the economics in the U.S., you know. It's a burden. It's not a freedom. You know, filmmaking is not about just picking up a little video camera and shoot. You know, it's a painful painful occupation and discipline. If you're a writer, you can just, be in a little room and start writing or typing it up on your, iPad even. But filmmaking is something that involves technology and people, which means money. It just, if you're not a maverick, if you're just interested, or I'm really just wanted to be interested in the arts and craft of filmmaking and not the fundraising part. So it's never liberating for me, and so I'm done. I'm almost done with this journey.
So you're done. You're done. You're done making films, or what's on the horizon for you? What are you looking at?
Well, I'm only, I guess, over the last even 20 years in Minnesota, I've only been involved with things that I'm interested in, and never really advertised my service. So the next phase would be, again, if someone may approach me with an idea or whatever that's really interesting, it's worth my time, I'll do it. And like this next upcoming thing would be playing around with the web medium, a series for the web for Theater Move, maybe doing a pilot and maybe collaborating with the local writer David Murrah, that I collaborated with 25 years ago. So it's a full circle. It'll be interesting. Back to community, but also the craft of doing more of a narrative cinema, about good screenplays and acting, and talent.
Well, I will be excited to see that when that's done.
Thank you.
How can folks learn more about your work?
I have an old website, called Passion Fruit Films. So passionfruitfilms, one word, .com or .org, or you can find me on Facebook. So.
Well, this has been an awesome pleasure. So thank you very much for coming in and talking with me.
Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you for watching this episode of Butter City, a show all about filmmaking with a little bit of a Minnesota twist. You can always find us on the web at www.buttercity.com. We tweet, we Facebook, we try to do everything we can to reach you, so check us out. Thank you.
Support for Butter City is provided by